Hey and welcome everyone, it's Egwin here from Beyond Systems. Today we are talking about standing once again. Now this is a standalone video as much as it is also a video answer because I got a couple of questions regarding the topic of standing without pain, standing for prolonged periods of time, or having to spend a lot of time standing, and so on and so on. And so we are going to pay some attention to that, and I'm gonna explain a couple of things that are important for standing, for a healthy standing posture and everything that comes with it. Now before we jump in the video, just let me remind you, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so if you want to stay up to date with things like biomechanics, how the body works, how to stay healthy, how to become more healthy, or how to improve your well-being, how mind, body and consciousness are connected, and all of those things. And now, without any further ado, let's just jump right into this topic of standing, right? So, first of all, I've done a couple of videos regarding this topic in the past, and I'm gonna link them in the description down below. One is about not hyperextending the knees. The other one is actually about standing poses or adaptation in a standing pose, or when you have to stand for prolonged periods of time in your job and stuff like that. So I'm gonna link those down below, but I want to go one level deeper with this video today, and like I said, it's a standalone. So let's talk about this thing that is standing. It's quite a complex task, although it seems so normal to each and every one of us because we do it on a regular day basis. It's quite complex in terms of neurology, our mind, our subconscious mind, our habits, as well as our anatomy and physiology. Obviously, what's involved is our feet, our legs, the hip, the spine specifically, and then how we hold our head, how we use our shoulders, just to name a few central areas that are of importance when we talk about a healthy posture, healthy standing. One thing that I want to point out right at the beginning is healthy standing, quote unquote, a healthy standing posture is not just about whether or not I'm physically aligned in a certain way, but a healthy standing posture also serves the purpose of still you being able to perform certain other physiological tasks at peak efficiency, like for instance breathing. So a healthy body posture, quote unquote, that seems to be healthy in terms of your geometric structure is not necessarily the most effective when it comes to things like efficient breathing, being calm, being centered, and so on and so on. And there are a couple of almost contradicting ideas about that out there. Now let me go through the body, starting from down below, from our feet. First of all, for healthy standing, foot health is of the utmost importance. While this pure idea of bone stacking, so meaning one bone and then we have the next bone perfectly aligned, stacked on top of it, while that idea is long overhauled and it's not how the body works, we have to take in account a lot of other things like connective tissue, fascial connections, tension in the muscles, ligaments, tendons, capsules, joint capsules, and so on and so on. And so it's more a tensegral aspect. I'm going to talk about that in a different video, but know that it's not just about pushing and pressing one bone perfectly on top of the other. It's about all the soft tissue aspects as well. Muscles have to be toned enough, yet also have to have the capacity for relaxation. They have to be coordinated well. The connective tissue ideally is soft and adaptable. Soft in the sense of those areas in the connective tissue that are supposed to glide, they have to glide. Those areas that are supposed to support and really build a tension pattern in the body, they're supposed to do that, and so on and so on. Talking about our feet and the arches of the feet. Now, biomechanically, they are the foundation for everything that happens upstairs, quote unquote. If our arches of the feet are healthy, then the tensional patterns that emerge from that into the rest of our body, they are optimized. With collapsed arches of the feet or something like that, some issues down there, some twisted bones, some weakness in the arches or in the extrinsic muscles, in the muscles that connect our lower leg down into the feet and so on, with imbalances down there, they always show much more exaggerated the further up we go. So this is really something that's important to pay attention to, and I'm gonna come to the point of how you can do that in a second. The next thing obviously is about our knees. It's very important that our knees are not hyperextended back. And I did a separate video about hyperextension in the knees and the small nugget that can help you there. I'm gonna link it in the description down below. Now, hyperextended knees, they lock you in place. But whenever you stand with hyperextended knees, most of the time also your hip sort of protrudes forward, creating a little bit of pressure in the lumbar spine, and really, more or less, I'm over-exaggerating now, more or less facilitating more a posture like this. So where you sort of get into a fixed state from which is actually difficult to get back out again. So we try to avoid hyperextended knees. The next aspect is my glutes and my quads and my hip flexor muscles, like the psoas, iliacus, as well as those parts of my quads and my leg muscles that run over the hip joint as well. Now they have the task, among then the core later, to actually also make sure that our pelvis is leveled. So in a healthy upright posture, see, when you take a look at the seam of my trousers here, see, this would be an anterior pelvic tilt, where I pour out water off this pelvic bowl sort of towards the front. This would be a posterior pelvic tilt with my tailbone sunk down. And where I want to be in a regular day is pretty much in this equilibrium in the middle between an anterior and posterior pelvic tilt, so that it's really nice and leveled. Now this is also my pelvic ring, the ability to move in the hip joints. This is the very important foundation for the rest of the spine upwards, for my lumbar spine, for my thoracic spine. Thus, it also plays a role in breathing. See, and this is one of the reasons why I'm over-exaggerating it. Most people won't breathe like this in a regular day breathing pattern. It will be much smaller, but it will be this wave-like mechanic through the spine that should be possible, rather than having a complete stiff leg hip connection with no possibility for the spine to move down here, because when the possibility for the spine to move down here with the breathing muscles is limited, then there is almost no choice for the body other than lifting the chest and jumping into a suboptimal breathing pattern, which again creates tensional patterns and so on that are not very ideal. The next thing, obviously, that many people have is either the shoulders being pulled back way too much and then this chest area protruding forward, or this tired, slouching, collapsed posture. Now all of those things, they come together. So when we take a look at what is necessary for healthy standing and also for standing for prolonged periods of time, now let me give you some pointers that are important. First of all, we won't solve this issue for each and everyone who is watching this video right now, right here, for the simple purpose that every single person's body structure is slightly different, and while it's possible to make some generalizations, it's almost impossible to give one or two specific exercises that will serve everyone. It's almost impossible. Now, or it is virtually impossible, yeah. Now, when we talk about posture. First of all, make sure that the arches of your feet are as healthy as possible. Talking about the arches of the feet, for people who stand for prolonged periods of time, is it a good idea to have an arch support in their shoes? Now here is my 2 cents for that. I would say if your arches are not healthy and you really have to stand in a very specific place without a lot of possibility to move around from left to right, and when I say a lot of possibility, even like moving a tiny little bit from left to right, like a waiter behind the bar or something like that, even that would already be sufficient movement to keep your arches healthy. But if you can't even do that, if you have to stand at the counter and just constantly work with the person in front of you and you are not really moving a lot, then I would say I'd at least consider an arch support in the shoes for part of the time that you're standing, and not for 24/7, not for every single day and every hour of the day. It's important that the foot doesn't get accustomed to the support, and that it only has the support when your focus is really on your work, when your focus is really on, okay, we can't really focus on the feet right now, I have to focus on my client or something like that. Now, in general, what's extremely important to understand is this: no movement or posture that you are in for prolonged periods of time is healthy. So, too much walking is a problem for the body. Too much running is a problem for the body. Too much sitting becomes a problem. Too much standing becomes a problem. Even too much lying around becomes a problem. Every single thing we do excessively eventually has negative impacts on the body structure and posture, and there needs to be some sort of balance in order to find a proper equilibrium that you can live in and thrive in. That being said, mind the arches. I'm gonna post another link down below where I talk about a possibility to restructure the arches of the feet. I've done a couple of videos regarding that. Mind your knees. Make sure that your knees are not hyperextended backwards. Now, all that being said, next joint up, hip joints, try to move around as much as possible. And I've done a separate video about that, again, link in the description down below, about this adaptation, about bringing a little bit more diversity into a posture. And say, even if you are a factory worker, you work on a conveyor band 24/7 almost, yeah? Like 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. Even there, try to sometimes change the posture with your feet. Also try to, if you have this habit of standing just on one leg, try to consciously sometimes switch to the other leg. Try to stand with both legs, with the inside edges of your feet parallel towards each other. Try minimalistic weight changes like I'm doing right now, where you literally just shift the weight from one side to the other and make sure that your knees and your hip joints are moving. See, I'm here with slightly bent knees, and I move just a tiny little bit from one side to the other. One knee extends, left extends when I move right, left bends and the right extends when I move left. So it's this just tiny, tiny, tiny movement. This can be done with the feet wider apart than shoulder width, or you can do it with the feet closer together. And when you do this, maybe at home, try this out for a moment when you watch this video, and then try to implement that in your regular day. This will also increase this pumping action of the leg muscles, which is very important to get blood and lymph flow running, and to make sure that you do not have too much of this almost congestion going on where there is high pressure and not a lot of blood and fluid movement in the legs. Try to get this pumping action going. Also work your toes, work the arches of your feet actively in order to engage with this pumping aspect. All right. The next thing, obviously, is the whole spinal region, how to hold the head, how to hold the shoulders. You can correct the base of your body, and I would suggest try to do as much as possible to correct the foundation of your body first. Because if you try to fix a spinal posture without also paying attention to the coordination and the structure in the legs, there is one problem. You try to correct the spinal structure, and maybe what actually needs to be done is that you need focus on the hip joints, how to level the pelvic ring. And without this leveling action, which is something that you have to solve in your leg structure, you can never get the spine in neutral, quote unquote, without creating high levels of tension in your body. And high levels of tension, just for the sake of pushing you into a more correct posture, is a very, very, very bad idea, because it creates more problems downstream. A lot of them, actually. So whenever you realize you need a lot of tension in order to become posturally more aligned, there is something wrong. There is something missing. There is something someone didn't tell you. Your teacher, your therapist didn't tell you. Because if you need tension in order to uphold a posture, then more often than not, the solution is an incomplete one. Not necessarily wrong, but an incomplete one. Now, there are a couple of methods out there that, in my opinion, are extremely good in terms of correcting posture and correcting a structure. Some of those systems, let's just say, they are not exactly mainstream. They are not the typical fitness approach that you learn when you go to the gym, but many of those systems are actually ones that professional people work with, that, say, dancers work with, artists work with, acrobats work with, actors work with, and so on and so on. One of those disciplines that I highly recommend if you have a good practitioner in your area is Alexander technique. Why? Because it focuses on reducing pressure in the joints and recreating an optimized posture with the least amount of effort necessary. It's a one-on-one session, and it requires some time to actually get you there. But it's better than just getting some postural cues and pull your shoulders back, pull your belly in, and do this, do that. And then you are constantly caught in this loop of trying to pull on your body without ever learning to actually listening to your body and understanding that sometimes it's not about where you have to pull. Sometimes it's about where do you have to release? Where do you maybe have to stretch? Which intent can you give your posture so that your body actually understands what you want from it? Another possibility down that line would also be the Franklin method, for example. There are a couple of Feldenkrais could also be an option, but when you do Feldenkrais, mind one thing: a lot of those exercises are done in what I call almost a desynchronized situation. So in Feldenkrais, a lot of things happen in a situation that you try to work on something with an exercise and you try to translate it into real life. And in some of the other techniques, like Alexander technique, Franklin method, and so on, This translation doesn't have to happen because the technique works in real life, in the real life situation, without it being a separate exercise per se. There's a lot more that one could say about those exercises, those possibilities, but I would prefer those to the typical just fitness, you have to train this muscle group and nothing else approach. Why? Because their approach is a more holistic one. They look at you from different angles and they pay attention to the whole body, not just isolated one tiny little problem. And that's what's really important. So whatever you can do to correct your posture up here is awesome, because often in slouching, because you're tired, because you can't hold your posture 24/7 with muscles that are not supposed to hold the posture. So things like this, they create a lot of pressure and compression of the legs. So it's important to do something for the legs, but it's just as important to then eventually free up the space up here so that literally every single breath is an aspect of liberation and of reduction of pressure in the joints, rather than it being something that presses down. This brings me to the next aspect, the last aspect that I really want to mention here, which is important. I mentioned earlier, it's almost impossible to give one exercise that fits all people. Just think of this. Think of someone with my body type. Yeah, I'm strong, but I'm also quite athletic in terms of my body shape. Now, think, for example, of a woman, maybe even the same size than me, who has really big breasts. Now, this is not in any way, I don't mean this in any way offending, but the way she has to organize her whole body structure from the legs into the spine is totally different from me, because I do not have that amount of weight in front of my chest. She has to deal with that in a certain way. And that is not something that you can fix with an isolated exercise where you say, okay, in your case, you have to just train this specific muscle. No, you have to adapt the whole coordination of the body, the whole body posture, structure to whatever body shape you have in front of you. And that is what I mean. It's not always that your trauma is different from my trauma. No, sometimes it's just simply the body shape that we have, that we work with, that is different. And there is no judgment in there whatsoever. That's just human. That's just what and who we are. All right, I hope this was of help, and also all the links down below for those who ask specific questions. If you have more specific questions, then please let me know, comment down below, and I make sure to answer them as much as possible. Right now, just try to restructure the lower areas of your body, try to recoordinate, especially glutes, hip flexors, and core muscles. This is something, this recoordination, where you definitely can work with fitness professionals quite nicely. And then also mind this upper area and try to find a system like some of those that I mentioned, Alexander Technique, Feldenkrais, Franklin method, some of those. It's somatic education methods mainly that really provide proper possibilities for reducing pressure in the joints and using the body more freely in such a way so that it then eventually can actually stand and move with almost no energy expenditure. And that's, I think, what we are all looking for: being efficient, being upright, being tall, just being in your power, being centered psychologically as well as physically, and just approaching life from there with this joy of being happy in your structure and in your physical body, because that's the foundation of your life, right? All right. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a beautiful time. All the best to you. See you around soon. And if you have questions, link them in the comment box down below. And please also share and like the video if you think there is other people out there who might be interested. It really helps me and potentially other people. Thanks a lot. Have a beautiful time.